The afternoon light, thick with the unhurried gold of a late California summer, filtered through the lace curtains of Helen Hayes's modest living room. It cast delicate, shifting patterns across the worn, familiar pages of her book, a dog-eared copy of a novel she'd read a dozen times. At 63, Helen had cultivated an expertise in finding peace in such simple, quiet moments. Her reading glasses, a constant companion, were perched on her nose. The small coastal town of Crescent Harbor had been her sanctuary for nearly 2 decades, a refuge built brick by brick over the chasm that had opened in her life on that terrible day in 1981. That was the day her 20-year-old son, Zane, the incandescent, ethereal vocalist of the band Crimson Fireline, had vanished from the sky. The sharp, shrill ring of the kitchen phone was a violent intrusion, shattering the tranquil afternoon. Helen sighed, the sound a soft puff of air in the quiet room. She carefully marked her page with a faded silk bookmark, a long-ago gift from Zane, before rising from her favorite armchair. Her joints protested with a familiar chorus of soft clicks and groans as she made her way to the kitchen, the linoleum cool and smooth beneath her slippered feet. "Hello," she answered, her voice placid, a tone perfected over years of deflecting telemarketers and wrong numbers. "Mrs. Hayes?" The voice on the other end was formal, official, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the kind of voice that delivered news, not conversation. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the United States Navy. I'm calling in conjunction with the Crescent Harbor Police Department regarding your son, Zane Hayes." Helen's breath caught, a sudden sharp intake of air that felt like swallowing glass. A cold dread, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in over a decade, washed over her. After 19 years, she had meticulously trained her heart not to leap at such calls. Hope was a cruel, sharp-toothed predator, and she had long ago starved it into submission. "What is this about?" she managed, her voice tight. "Ma'am, we've recovered what we believe to be the private jet your son and his band were on when they disappeared. We need you to come to Port Holston Naval Base." The words struck her not as sound, but as a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Helen gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles turning a bloodless white against the yellowed formica. "I don't have time for pranks," she said, her voice sharp and brittle, a shield against the sudden, terrifying surge of emotion. "My son disappeared 19 years ago. I made my peace with the fact that he died in that crash. I don't want that peace disturbed." She slammed the receiver down into its cradle before the man could respond, the plastic crack echoing in the silent kitchen. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. The grief she had worked so hard to bury under layers of routine and quiet acceptance now threatened to erupt. A volcano of pain she was no longer equipped to contain. She hadn't just lost Zane. Shortly after the disappearance, her husband Malcolm had been swallowed by a darkness of his own. A violent, public breakdown had led to his institutionalization. He was declared stabilized and released 5 years later, but the man who returned was a hollowed-out version of the husband she knew. He moved back into their old house, but lived a life of self-imposed exile, distant from Helen, withdrawn from the community, a ghost haunting the rooms of their shared past. The stress had not just changed him, it had erased him. Helen returned to her armchair, but the words on the page blurred into meaningless black squiggles. She couldn't focus. The phone rang again, insistent, a relentless summons. She let it ring, counting each shrill peal like a heartbeat. 4, 5, 6. Finally, unnerved by its persistence, she answered. "I told you—" "Mrs. Hayes, please don't hang up." This time, it was a woman's voice, calm, professional, and imbued with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. I'm FBI agent Dana Truitt. I understand this is difficult, Mrs. Hayes, but we have indeed recovered the aircraft. The Navy wasn't pranking you. We need you at the base. Helen felt the sting of tears behind her eyes, hot and sharp. The carefully constructed dam of her composure was breaking. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words barely audible. I thought... I'll come. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. Do you need transportation? No, Helen said, her voice gaining a sliver of its former strength. I'll manage. She hung up and moved through her small house mechanically, her mind a blank slate. She chose a simple navy dress and comfortable shoes, her movements automatic, a pantomime of a person getting ready. As she walked out of her home toward the train station, a familiar car pulled over. The window rolled down, revealing the weathered, grief-etched face of Patricia Maddox. Helen! Patricia's voice was thick with unshed tears. Are you heading to Port Holston? Helen nodded, unable to speak. She recognized them immediately, despite the 19 years that had carved new lines into their faces. Trent Maddox's parents. He had been the flamboyant, brilliant bass guitarist in Crimson Fireline. Come with us, Donald offered, his voice a low rumble as he opened the back door. Helen gratefully accepted, settling into the cool leather seat. Patricia turned to face her, a crumpled tissue in her hand. The Kleins are on their way too. Derek's aunt and uncle, his parents passed a few years ago. And the Morenos, Ricky's cousins. His parents are gone now as well. Old age. The drive took hours, a journey through a landscape of tense silence, punctuated only by Patricia's occasional sniffles and the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Helen stared out the window, watching the California coastline blur past, a ribbon of gold and blue that seemed indifferent to their pilgrimage of pain. She remembered the boys piling into a van, loud and boisterous, on their way to a gig, Trent with his ridiculous feather boa, Derek meticulously tuning his guitar, Ricky smiling shyly, and Zane, her Zane, scribbling lyrics in a tattered notebook. When they finally arrived at Port Holston Naval Base, the scene was one of overwhelming organized chaos. Navy personnel in crisp whites, FBI agents in dark suits, local police, forensics teams in white coveralls, and a cluster of what appeared to be expedition scientists moved with grim purpose under the harsh afternoon sun. Agent Dana Truitt met them at the gate, her badge gleaming. She was younger than Helen had expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Thank you all for coming. I know this is incredibly difficult, she said, her voice a low, compassionate murmur. She led them across the bustling base to an open field, sectioned off with yellow tape. And then Helen saw it. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the exact jet from Malcolm's photographs. He had been the band's manager, a proud, almost obsessive documentarian of their burgeoning career. Before the flight, he'd used his old film camera to memorialize what he'd called their shooting star moment. Now, the plane sat before them, a ghost dragged from the abyss. Rust streaked its once gleaming white fuselage like dried blood. Seaweed hung from the wings like macabre funeral shrouds. The bold red stripes that had once been so vibrant were now faded to a dull, bruised brown. Dr. Martinez, the lead expedition scientist, stepped forward. We were on a deep-sea ecological expedition, exploring hydrothermal vents. Our sonar picked up unusual metallic reflections. When our submersible's camera confirmed it was an aircraft at a depth of 12,000 feet, we immediately contacted the authorities. He gestured to the plane. The wreck was surprisingly intact. The doors were sealed, the windows cracked inward. It's remarkable how well-preserved the vessel's body is. Helen's eyes found them then, a row of body bags, arranged respectfully on tarps near the plane. Her heart clenched, a fist of ice in her chest. Is that... Agent Truitt nodded grimly. That's why we needed you here, for identification. At those extreme depths, Dr. Martinez added, his tone clinical. With near-freezing temperatures and low oxygen, decomposition is incredibly slow.
It's plausible they're still identifiable. Patricia Maddox gripped her husband's arm. Please, she whispered, her voice a raw plea. We need to see. The officials exchanged a somber glance before a technician carefully unzipped the first bag. A strangled wail pierced the air, a sound of pure, undiluted agony. Trent, my baby! Patricia collapsed against her husband. Even after 19 years, the red leopard print pants were unmistakable. Trent Maddox, identified immediately. The second bag revealed Derek Clean, his signature leather vest and distinctive belt buckle confirming his identity. His aunt and uncle crumpled against each other, their sobs lost in the wind. The remaining bags contained men none of them recognized, dressed in expensive, deteriorated suits. The boys were supposed to meet with a producer from an international record label, Helen said quietly. My husband, Malcolm. He handled the details. Suddenly, a forensics technician looked up, his face pale. Gunshot wounds, he said, his voice sharp. All of them. Multiple. Agent Truitt's expression hardened. Then something went very wrong in the air. The absence of the pilot suggests the plane was set to autopilot, and they parachuted out. A wild, desperate spark ignited in Helen's chest. Zane and Ricky's bodies, they aren't here. Maybe there's a chance. It's possible, the agent conceded, her voice careful. But we are officially changing this from a missing persons case to a multiple homicide investigation.
The press arrived like vultures. When Helen's turn came, she stood before them, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. I had lost all hope, she admitted. But with this new evidence, I pray the police will find something more about my son. She looked directly into the camera. Zane, if you're watching this, please, come back to me. Come home. The drive home was a silent, solitary affair. Inside her house, Helen pressed her back against the closed door and finally let go. The tears came in great heaving sobs, a 19-year deluge. She slid to the floor and wept. After an eternity, she pulled herself together and navigated to an old Usenet forum. Support for families of the missing. Her fingers trembled as she typed, but they found the plane. After 19 years. 2 of the boys were inside, shot. My Zane wasn't there. I don't know what to think. Responses trickled in. Prayers, encouragement, and the gentle caution of those who knew the sting of dashed hopes. Helen, please protect your heart. She lost track of time until panic shot through her. Her doctor's appointment. She also wanted to visit Malcolm. He deserved to know. She hurried out, but the bus was already pulling away. 40 minutes until the next one. A man stood at the far end of the bus shelter watching her. He was perhaps 50, with a hard, weathered face. His stare was unnerving, cold, and hostile. Nice day, Helen offered. The man didn't smile. Saw you on the news, he said flatly. Your son. Thought he'd be dead by now. Sinking at the bottom of some trench? Helen recoiled. What is your problem? Another bus, not hers, approached. The man climbed aboard, but through the window, his eyes remained fixed on her, his expression a mask of unreadable menace. Shaken, Helen decided to walk the 3 blocks to the supermarket and use the payphone. She needed to call Malcolm. After a brief, stilted conversation with her husband, she hung up and turned. Her blood ran cold. The same man from the bus stop stood directly behind her. What? He said rudely when she gasped. Helen didn't answer. She walked away quickly, her heart hammering. She cast a nervous glance over her shoulder. The man had picked up the payphone receiver, but his eyes were still following her. This wasn't a coincidence. She pushed through the supermarket's automatic doors, seeking refuge in the crowd. Needing a distraction, she took the escalator to the 2nd floor. The electronics section opened before her, rows of televisions all displaying the same image, her own face speaking to reporters. A woman with a shopping basket stopped beside her. Oh my God, that's you, isn't it? You're the mother. Others began to gather, a suffocating wave of sympathy and morbid curiosity. Please give the lady some space, a firm voice commanded. It was the man from the bus stop. Before she could protest, he gripped her wrist, his hold like iron, and steered her toward an emergency stairwell. Helen wrenched her hand free. Why are you following me? I'm here to deliver a message, he said, his expression cold. If you talk to anyone about this, police, FBI, anyone, it'll be the end of everything. In one swift, terrifying motion, he pulled her close and pressed something hard and metallic against her stomach. A gun. Please, she whispered, terror flooding her veins. If you know where my son is, if he's alive, you talk, and you can wave that chance goodbye, he hissed. How do I know you really know anything about Zane? The man studied her, then spoke, his voice low and chillingly precise. The lighthouse keeper's daughter waits by the shore, counting stars that fell before. Helen's blood turned to ice. Those were lyrics. Lyrics from a song Zane had been writing just before he disappeared. Only she had heard those words. We know everything, the man continued. We've been watching you for years. My son, he's really alive? Helen's voice cracked. Keep your mouth shut, the man said, stepping back. We'll be in touch. He turned and descended the stairs, his footsteps fading into silence. Helen collapsed against the wall, trembling. If Zane was truly alive, what had he become? And what terrible price would she have to pay to see him again? After her doctor's appointment, a car horn blared. Across the street, a dark sedan idled. The man from the supermarket sat behind the wheel, gesturing for her to get in. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But his words echoed, "Bad things will happen to you and to your boy." She crossed the road. "Get in the back," he ordered. The locks clicked shut. "I know you were planning to visit your husband," he said, pulling into traffic. "Can't let that happen." He tossed a pair of handcuffs onto the back seat. "Put these on." "I don't know you. I should have called the police." In a flash, he turned, grabbed her wrists, and snapped the cuffs on. "Make a sound, and I'll kill you right here."
They drove for hours, leaving Crescent Harbor behind for a lonely dirt track deep in the woods. A small, isolated cabin appeared through the trees. Inside, it smelled of mildew and stale smoke. He produced a roll of duct tape. When he returned from a phone call outside, he moved to the far wall and pressed a section of wood paneling, revealing a hidden compartment. He extracted several small, tightly wrapped plastic packages filled with white powder. "What is that?" Helen gasped, the tape now removed. "My name is Edric Canvo," he said. "I have business with your son. If you ever want to see him again, you'll swallow these." "No, they're drugs. I have a heart condition. This could kill me." Edric drew his gun, pressing the cold barrel to her temple. "I'm not a good man. You swallow these packages or I pull this trigger. 3 seconds. 1, 2. With shaking hands, Helen picked up the first package. One by one, she forced them down her throat. 4 in total. "Good," Edric said, lowering the gun. "Now take these." He gave her a bottle of pills. He tied her to a chair. "Someone will come for you. Stay quiet, and you'll see your boy." Hours later, through a drowsy, drug-induced haze, she heard a truck approaching. Edric untied her. "Time to go." He led her outside, where 2 men speaking rapid Spanish waited. They pushed her toward the vehicle's rear. One man pressed a section of the interior wall, revealing a hidden compartment. "Get in, stay quiet." Helen ducked inside. In the darkness, she slowly made out other figures. Women. All of them young, their faces hollow and silent. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Human trafficking, drug smuggling, and she, Helen Hayes, a 63-year-old grieving mother, was now a part of it. The journey was a timeless, jolting nightmare. Finally, the truck stopped for good. The secret panel opened. A massive man with Slavic features stood silhouetted against the bright lights of a warehouse. They were herded into a side room. One by one, the women were taken into an adjacent room marked with a radiation warning. The low hum of an X-ray machine was the only sound. When her turn came, another man entered. The left side of his face was a grotesque ruin of scar tissue. He carried a tray of small cups. "Drink," he commanded, "to pass packages." He looked at Helen with disgust. "Why they send us old woman? She can barely stand." He grabbed her arm. "I take her to Bruno. He will deal with her. A faulty product." He dragged her down a flight of stairs into a cold, dark basement and shoved her through a door. The room smelled of a slaughterhouse. In the center, 3 women knelt, blindfolded and gagged. A man stood with his back to them, a gun raised. "Gerald, wait!" the broken-faced man called. "Bruno needs to see this." The man called Gerald turned, and Helen's world stopped. It was Ricky Moreno, the lead guitarist of Crimson Fireline. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed in his, followed instantly by alarm. "I think you are," Helen began. "Get me a gag, a blindfold, and zip ties. Now!" Ricky barked. He moved with a practiced, terrifying efficiency, silencing and binding Helen. "I'll take her to Bruno myself," Ricky said, taking the gun. "You finish with these 3. Behind them, as Ricky pulled her up the stairs, 3 shots rang out. 1, 2, 3. Precise, final. Ricky led her to an office and knocked. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. A lock turned. He pushed her inside. "Sit," he commanded. Hands removed her gag, cut her zip ties, and finally lifted the blindfold. Kneeling before her, his face etched with a pain that mirrored her own, was Zane. Her son. "Zane?" she whispered. She looked from him to Ricky. Both of you. You work for these people?" "No time to explain, Mother," Zane said, his voice low and urgent. "And no one can know we are related." Before she could answer, chaos erupted outside. Shouting, gunfire, screams. Ricky threw the deadbolt. Zane went to a filing cabinet, pulling out 2 handguns. "The phone!" Helen spotted it on the desk. "We have to call the police." "No, Mother." Zane's voice was like stone. "This is our life now." Heavy fists pounded on the door. Then, more gunshots, right outside. A different, lighter knock. "It's me," a voice said. "Edric." Ricky unlocked the door. Edric Canvo slipped inside, blood splattered on his shirt. "It's done," he said. "Alec is dead. The Empire is mine, and as promised," he looked at Zane, "I will make you a real band again. All you have to do is keep funneling the money." He glanced at Helen. "Your mother was about to visit your father. If she'd told him, he would have called Alec. He would have blown our whole operation." Helen's voice was a bare whisper. "The police. They found the jet." A look of dawning horror crossed her face. She turned to Zane. "Your father, he knew about this? All along?" Zane couldn't meet her eyes. "It's a long story, Mom."
The weight of the ultimate betrayal crashed over her. Malcolm's breakdown, his seclusion. It wasn't grief. It was a strategy. A lie. As the 3 men began discussing logistics, body disposal, cleaning crews, Helen's eyes fixed on the phone. While they plotted murder, she moved slowly, silently. Her fingers closed around the receiver. "No!" Edric saw her, his gun already drawn. Zane lunged at trying to wrench the phone from her hand. "Mother, don't!" But she held on. She heard the line connect, heard a voice. "FBI! Truitt speaking!" Edric's finger tightened on the trigger. Everything slowed. Ricky charged Edric. The gun fired. And Zane, in a final redemptive act, threw himself between the bullet and his mother. The impact spun him around. Blood bloomed across his chest as he collapsed into her arms. "Help!" Helen screamed into the phone. "Help us!" Ricky slammed into Edric, sending the gun skittering across the floor. In one fluid motion, Ricky scooped it up and fired. The shots tight and precise. Edric crumpled. Ricky grabbed the phone. "This is Ricky Moreno. From Crimson Fireline." He gave their location. "Zane Hayes has been shot. Send a tactical team. Now!" At the hospital, the world was a blur of controlled chaos. Zane was rushed to surgery. Helene, after the humiliating but necessary ordeal of passing the evidence she carried, was admitted for observation. Hours later, Agent Truitt arrived. "Zane is alive," she said, her voice gentle. "But he's in a coma. He flatlined twice. It's critical." Helen closed her eyes, a prayer of thanks on her lips. "Ricky told us everything," Dana continued. "Your husband, Malcolm, was the mastermind. He lured the band onto that jet. The deal was with Alex Sakaloff, a cartel boss. They were to launder drug money. When Trent and Derek refused, Malcolm and Sakaloff's men killed them. They spared Zane because he was Malcolm's son, and Ricky because Sakaloff saw value in his marketability. Your husband threatened to have you killed if Zane didn't cooperate." Helen wept, not with grief, but with a cold, hard rage. "Malcolm is in custody," Truitt assured her. "As for Zane and Ricky, it's complex. But with Ricky's full cooperation and the clear evidence of coercion, there's a good chance for leniency." Later, a nurse wheeled Helen to the ICU. Through the glass, she saw him. Zane lay motionless, a pale figure tethered to a web of tubes and wires. Helen reached out, her trembling fingers touching his hand. It was warm. "My baby," she whispered, tears falling freely. "My sweet boy." "I'm so sorry," she wept. "Sorry I couldn't protect you. Sorry your father did this. But you saved me, Zane. You took that bullet for me." She squeezed his hand. "I'll fight for you now," she promised the still figure of her son. "Your father will pay, not you. You were just a boy." The machines beeped a steady, rhythmic song of survival. Zane remained locked in his coma, but Helen stayed, holding his hand, a silent sentinel watching over the child she had lost, and found again, praying for one more miracle, praying he would open his eyes and call her mother, just one more time.